Yair Rodriguez took a big gamble here in Mexico City, taking on Jeremy Stevens, but instead of getting a victory or a defeat, the man left with a no contest. Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Segura, and welcome to MMA Fighting's UFC Mexico post-fight show. Joining me to break down all the action, like we did in the previous show, is Mr. Rodrigo Del Campo from Indiscutido. Rodrigo, what a bizarre night. A bunch of odd things happened, but the weirdest was probably Yair, the result of Yair. It was a 15-second fight. Yair takes on Jeremy Stevens. There was an accidental eye poke. Stevens couldn't continue. He couldn't even open his eye. And then the fight was called a no contest. What are your initial thoughts on this result? It was quite a scene.
It was a night of peaks and valleys that ended just in such an anticlimactic fashion, especially because since there's no TV angle that actually shows what happens. There's a TV shot that, yes, there was contact, and Yair later admitted, yeah, I tried to take distance, and there was contact. I really did touch his face. He didn't know if he touched his eye or not. If he did, he says he's sorry. He apologizes. It happens. It was completely accidental. And there's no TV shot that says, okay, yeah, it went into the eye. Yes, there's damage. So that's where all the controversy in the Twitter and social media started going against. I mean, if it's an accidental eye poke, these things happen. I think it was such a weird night after the Brandon Moreno fight, the Carlos Esparza, Alexa Grasso fight, and then going into the main event and having ended up in a 15-second no contest. I think it threw the public over the edge, and there's no excuse. The way the Mexican people acted after the fight is just completely unexcusable.
Yeah, I want to touch on that. So the controversy was not only about the actual fight itself, but it actually spilled outside of the cage. The public clearly expected a war. These two are two of the more exciting fighters at 145 pounds. They delivered a 15-second bout. They were very upset. They were throwing beer, popcorn. Stevens had to get escorted out. It was a pretty ugly scene. I mean, what do you make of that situation? It's almost we've seen that before, but usually in brawls, right? The UFC 229 stuff with Conor McGregor and Khabib, but this was really bizarre.
Yeah, it's different. We've seen worse. We've seen, throwing the dolly at a boss. We've seen fights in the McGregor fights after the fight in the corridors, in the halls. We've seen massive brawls. This time, I think the people were upset about the result of the Carlos Esparza, Alexa Grasso. I personally had it as a tie, as a 20-28. People were upset about the decision, and I think that just anger about the decision carried over into what happened with the Yair fight. They clearly thought that Jeremy could continue. We don't know. No one really knows. Only Jeremy and the doctors know if he could continue or not. And I think that for the hardcore fan, we had the Todd Duffy situation, and now we have the Jeremy Stevens situation. And it's just anger about what was supposed to be fireworks ending in 15 seconds.
Yeah, it was certainly bizarre. But I mean, Jeremy Stevens couldn't even open his eye. I think and he's one of the toughest guys in the division, in the UFC alone. So it's hard to question, if he really was faking it, right? Because that's what fans are saying. I think, you got to give him the benefit of the doubt, and he couldn't even open his eyes. But let's discuss what happens next. It doesn't seem like an immediate rematch is in Yair's plans. He wasn't too stoked about fighting Jeremy in the first place leading up to this event. He just said that he's not sure. He's got to get back, and talk to his team and all that. Where do you think he goes next?
Wherever the UFC says, because I think in the position that Yair is right now, even after the Korean Zombie elbow, with what happened when he got cut, with what happened getting injured for the first time, the Sandes Abid fights in September last year, I think if the UFC says there's going to be a rematch, I don't think they can say no. We'll see what happens. It obviously wouldn't be in Mexico. We'll see if they even want to come back to Mexico after what happened with the crowd. I think there's been worse cases, but we'll see what they say. I think it was a problem that there's no UFC official here in Mexico. Yeah. There's PR staff, but there's no Dave Shaw. There's no really UFC officials to actually gauge what they feel what happened with the crowd.
Yeah, but I know it's obviously, whatever the UFC usually plans for these situations. But where would you like to see Yair go?
I would like to see Yair against Jose Aldo. That was one of the planned fights for Mexico. I don't think Jose Aldo wants it. And that's why I think we eventually will come back to Jeremy and Yair.
I mean, you were there as well. We were talking to Brian Ortega yesterday. He said that that fight was actually proposed between himself and Yair, obviously for this card, but it didn't come to fruition. And then, speaking to Brian Ortega, he seems to be wanting to get back into the cage fairly soon. Could that be an option for Yair?
We'll see. He seems to be excited with the Korean Zombie fight in Busan at the end of December. If that doesn't come through, it has to be Brian and Yair and Jose Aldo. I think those are the fighters. And if Jeremy's really injured, he's not going to be able to fight in like 6 months.
Yeah, hopefully Jeremy is okay. That's first, first things first, because
we had Bisping calling the fights, and I think Bisping was the first one that said, "Oh, I know what happens with these." The thing is that the range of damage to the eye is so wide. It could be only a scratch that heals in a week, or it could be just really bad damage that needs surgery. I want to see if Jeremy can fly out of Mexico, because if there's really damage to the eye, he probably won't be able to fly.
Yeah, due to the pressure and all that. So definitely we don't know exactly what's going on with Jeremy. Hard to weigh in on his future with what just happened. So let's discuss the co-main event. Another weird bout, but nonetheless, unlike the main event, it was a full fight, and it was a very exciting one. Obviously, Carla Esparza defeating Alexa Grasso. Very controversial decision. How'd you score that fight?
I had it 28-28. I had the first round for Carla, the second as well, and then I have the third, the 10-8. What I have a problem with the judges in the fight is that only one of them scored the third round as a 10-8, which I think was, for my taste, kind of obvious for Alexa. I saw it at 10-8 in the third and a 28-28. I think the first one was kind of close. The second one's obviously for Carla. I need to rewatch it. We're working. We're doing a lot of things. But that's my first taste. 28-28 with a 10-9, 10-9, and an 8-10 for Alexa.
I think either way, this was one of those fights that even the loser in Alexa Grasso, her stock rose. I mean, she went the distance with the former champion. She displayed a lot of her new skills, right? Really gave Esparza some tough, a tough battle with the wrestling. Would you agree with that Alexa Grasso's stock just went up even in defeat?
Yeah, I think after the Tatiana Suarez fight, everyone thought, can she hang with the top of the division? Now, beating clearly Karolina Kowalkiewicz last fight and giving a war to Carla Esparza, almost submitting her in the third round, almost knocking her out at one point in the fight. I think that she has just shown that she's a top 5 fighter, that she can hang with the top of the division. We'll see what the UFC has in store for both of them, because Carla also showed the same thing, coming back from 2 losses, beating Virna Jandiroba, beating Alexa Grasso. Carla is again in the top of the division.
Yeah, how bad did Carla need this victory? Because, I mean, it was 2 back-to-back losses. It seems like she was kind of forgotten, when you talk about the title picture at strawweight.
Especially since the Virna Jandiroba was a short fight that Virna took in short notice. Because, then you see that the result might be different. So she needed, even if she lost, a good showing against Alexa to show that she can hang with the top of the division. And I think it's 10 years for Carla Esparza hanging with the top of the division. It's one of the greatest careers in 115.
Now, also on that card, we saw Irene Aldana pick up a very, very dominant win against Vanessa Melo, who took the fight on short notice, but nonetheless put on an admirable effort. Where does Irene go from here? Because she's 4-1 in her last 5 bouts. Her last bout, I talked to her and she said she had a bunch of complications. She was very dehydrated against Raquel Pennington, and even then she went to a split decision loss. Where do you think she goes next?
I think that the main thing is that Irene once again showed that she's an entertaining fighter. She's a fighter that's looking to finish, that goes forward, that has bomb, that throws bomb with her hands. All the credit to Vanessa Melo, because the common thought between all of us was that she couldn't make it to the 15 minutes because of the altitude in Mexico. She was still fighting at the mark, the 14, 15-minute mark. Irene almost finished her. I think Irene's stock rose because she took 3 fights on such short notice, 3 weight cuts, 3 entertaining fights. And I think the UFC now knows that you can have an entertaining bout, whoever you put it in front of Irene Aldana.
Yeah, for sure. She wants a top 5 opponent next. Would you like to see that for her next?
Holly Holm was at some point in this year offered to Irene Aldana. That's how the UFC sees Irene Aldana. So probably she's going to have a top 5 or probably a top 5 opponent for her next fight.
For sure. And also we saw Brandon Moreno go to a draw. Another weird fight against Askarov there. First of all, how'd you score that one real quick?
That's a fight I have to see again. That's a fight, for people that don't know, where Jorge Masvidal was doing a scrum.
That's
We were doing the Spanish scrum while the fight was going on. I need to see it again. I think Brandon was clear in saying there was a 30-27 card for Brandon. He says that card's wrong. I lost the second round. I think Brandon thinks he won 29-28. I'll have to watch it again, but definitely there was no 10-8 rounds for me, at least for my taste. And definitely no one won 3 rounds on that fight.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. You have a card with a 10-8, you have a card that's 30-27, and those cards are just wrong for the fight we saw.
I know Brandon was disappointed, but look, he's back in the UFC, right? He didn't lose, right? And he put on a really exciting fight, and I think the fans really appreciated that. So, there's definitely nothing to be sad about there. And I think a big storyline in this card was the flyweights are back in business. It kind of seems like an obvious question, but did the UFC make the right decision, right?
I think so. The Tyson and Sergio Perez maybe wasn't the most entertaining fight, but with taking it with such notice and not trying to risk it, but seeing Sergio come back, have a good weight cut to 125, seeing him back in action. Askar and Brandon was one of the best 125 fights in the year. I think the division clearly is back.
Yeah, for sure. Anything you want to highlight from the rest of the card? A lot of good moments.
I think Steven Peterson just getting that knockout against Martin Bravo. How do you counterattack a spinning back fist with a spinning back fist? It's horrible for Martin Bravo. We'll see what happens. He's at the hospital getting checked right now. It's the second just bad knockout that he has taken, both at this arena. We'll see what happens. And obviously Paul Craig, last fight in his deal, just plowing through Vinicius Moreira, an amazing fight. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he resigns with the UFC. But I think with the last 2 wins with Paul Craig, I think I think the UFC should be obvious that he should resign Paul Craig.
Certainly also a name, people know him.
Yeah.
He might not be the biggest superstar, but he's a name in that division. Also, I quickly want to highlight El Teco Quiñones just looked like a complete superstar in this card, defeating Carlos Huachin in a very dominant decision. We thought that was going to be a bloodbath, and there wasn't much blood, but there was certainly a pretty good fight there. I know Teco doesn't really speak much English, and it's hard at all. Yeah, but. For those, because this is obviously MMA fighting, we have an American audience. Yeah. But for those who don't know, here in Mexico, the guy's a superstar.
That's the fighter that most people identify with. I mean, Yair might be a bigger star, but more people identified with Teco because of where he comes from, because from his humble beginnings. Even with Yair being from a very humble town in Parral, Chihuahua, I think Teco is the one more people identify with. That's why he's a star. He was the first fight on the Tough Latin America Season 1, which aired on free-to-air TV, and I think really identified some people. And also Polo Reyes losing badly, and it's another finish for Polo Reyes, 145. I think it's hard to say it, but I think both Martin Bravo and Polo Reyes are looking at their walking papers. I think they're going to be cut.
Yeah, certainly, the losses don't help, although they're very exciting fighters, but, we know you have to win to stay in the UFC. All right, now, just to end this off, it was a weird night, like I said, very weird. We had highs and lows. A lot of Mexicans lost. Some, got the draw. Some got victories. Overall, this was the UFC's first trip to Mexico City in 2 years. Overall, do you think this was a good night for Mexico MMA?
I mean, before all the weirdness in the card started, it was a good night. There was a good ticket sale. It's, I think, over 10,000 people, which is good for a fight night. I think if you want to come back, you need to have at least open workouts, at least ceremonial weigh-ins. A lot of people really anticipated that. I think it was a good night. It was a weird night, but that's something you can't control when MMA goes. So
it was a very MMA night.
It was a very MMA night, and we had this weird feeling when Yair and Jeremy stepped into the octagon that something was bound to happen. And when I saw the eye poke, I said, this is going to be a no contest, because that's the way the night was going.
Yeah, it was almost too good to be true. All right, well, Rodrigo, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on this post-fight show. Remember, keep it locked here to MMAfighting.com for all your news leaving the event. Thank you so much for sticking with us. They're kicking us out, so we better get out of here. Thank you.